I just don't understand how her heart rate didn't go up and down. Because if you've come home and you know, even if you don't know that your ex has been killed, even if you have sort of orchestrated or been there or had anything to do with someone getting beat up quite brutally, my heart rate would be through the roof.
Yeah, there's no way I'd be asleep.
And she went to bed and she actually went to sleep.
Yeah, she could actually sleep.
Just a quick disclaimer, the content presented in this podcast is based on real events and may contain graphic descriptions of violence, crime scenes and other disturbing material. Listener discretion is advised. This episode is sponsored by Think Forensic.
Think Forensic are a one-stop shop for all things forensic science and crime solving. They hold experience days, as well as corporate events, team building events, and general education for primary school right the way up to university level, as well as other events and consultancy. There's also a shop where you can get your hands on all things crime solving, from evidence gathering to packaging and collecting evidence, as well as other forensic science equipment.
For more information or to book on an experience day, please visit the website.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Grave Secrets. Thank you very much for everyone that is tuning in.
For another episode?
Yeah, I just can't believe that people put my voice in their ears.
Everyone says you've always got a really nice voice. I've had a few comments saying how nice your voice is.
Well,
and that it's really calming as well.
Oh,
I don't get those about mine. So
stories.
Yeah, actually, I think you should do.
Yeah.
Or I always expect you to read like children's books.
Funnily enough, I bought one on holiday, which I thought was 79p, and it turned out that it was 7.99. So I read "Don't Let the Pigeon Drive the Bus" to everyone on holiday about 5 times.
I can well imagine. I always say Beth should be like a children's TV presenter or something. I just feel like you're missing your calling in life, being in forensics.
Yeah, there was an outfit I wore on holiday as well, and everyone was like, presenter.
Yeah, children's TV presenter every day.
So today we have a case study for you. This one's actually based in Scotland.
It is. So we have normally, well, I say we've stuck to the UK cases recently, but last week we did the Idaho case.
Yep.
So this one is a discovery of a man's body in a Scottish nature reserve. So police are pretty much up against the clock straight away to find a suspect, because this was actually really brutal as well.
Yeah, there was a few officers on the case that had been in the job for between like 18 and 20 years, and they said that it was one of the most horrific scenes that they'd ever come across. One of them said you wouldn't leave a dog in the same state that they'd found the body.
No.
Yeah.
And I think with this case, when I was researching it, there is also a lot of pictures out there as well.
Yeah.
And when you are just listening to something and then you see the pictures and it matches up and it sort of puts it into perspective how horrific this crime scene actually was for everyone involved.
Yeah.
So if we start off on the 7th of June, 2018, so at 5:30 a.m, a body is found near the Kirrimore,
I think. Kirrimore
nature reserve, which I believe is in Dundee.
Yeah, so it was Kinnordy Nature Reserve in Kirrimore in Angus, Scotland.
Oh God, this is going to get confusing already. At least we haven't got some confusing names in this one.
No,
it's just the locations that we're finding hard.
I do apologise every time for my... In fact, maybe we should just do a short clip of me apologising to camera.
Every time. I'm really sorry.
For all of my... butchering of pronunciations.
So this area, as you can tell, nature reserve, was extremely secluded, and there wasn't really much around it at all, was there?
No.
So Kirrimore in general is a quiet agricultural town, very low crime rate. So we say this all the time, don't we? These things always happen in the most unexpected places. And, you know, when we come on the podcast, we never think... You never hear any of the local residents saying, oh, yeah, we expected that to happen here, do you?
No.
They always happen in sort of like the quiet areas. And I just think that for the residents of these areas, it must be so scary.
Yeah. And I always think as well, in a way, does it help cases? As we'll find out, there was quite a lot of evidence in this. Well, there was an overwhelming amount of evidence in this case. But in other cases that we've covered that have been in more built-up areas, the case that we covered, which was the stabbing in Manchester, where the offender had actually left the house but then was out onto the busy street.
Yeah.
And they kind of lost track of the attacker and only managed to pick them back up again on using a cash machine.
Yeah.
So in a built-up area, it's trickier to track.
But is it easier or is it harder? Because in a built-up area, there's more CCTV.
Yeah, I was just about to say, but then there's more cameras and things.
But then in a rural area, there's not many people, but not as many CCTV opportunities either.
I guess it's a catch-22 either way, isn't it?
It literally could work either way. So RSPB workers, are they the wildlife people? I thought it was,
My sister is all over that.
Oh, shame. They'd gone to the nature reserve for your sister. Hey, Phoebes. They'd gone to the nature reserve at 4 a.m, just ready to basically start work. And what they came across was a vehicle that had been set on fire. And at the side, well, just to the side of this vehicle was a body which was also badly burned. Just for those people to see that. Yeah. Like, can you imagine, like you just said, your sister going to start a shift and you come across something like that? You're not expecting it. It's awful for these people. And I wonder if they do get help for what they've seen.
Yeah, you'd like to think so.
Because if the police were shocked by this case, surely the workers would have been horrified by it.
And you also don't know how close up they got, because I couldn't quite make out, because of their strong Scottish accents, what they'd said, but they originally did they think it was I'm sure they said like mule body or something. They didn't think it was a human, basically.
Right, okay.
I couldn't work out what specifically
with that accent.
Was, but they thought it was an animal, basically. Which you would, again, wouldn't you? Like, yes, someone's clearly set the car alight.
Yeah, something's happened, but you think a burnt out car is not that rare to come across, is it, in a secluded area? But the investigators soon saw that there were very significant injuries to the body. So when someone burns evidence is normally when they're trying to cover something up, isn't it, in general?
Yeah.
But in this case, there was still significant injuries to the victim's face, neck, body and legs. And they were all looking like really serious cut or slash marks at this point. So straight away, the investigators know that this is not just a burnt out car. This is very suspicious circumstances. Suspicious.
It's also not suicide, because again, it could have been someone that had set their own car alight, but clearly with the injuries, you're looking at a murder case from the off.
Yeah.
So officers were attending the scene. They were obviously searching the area, but identification of the victim was difficult, as most of the physical possessions, which would have been useful for identification, were obviously burnt.
And then you've also got, like we spoke about before, you've got identifying features, which are a lot harder to see if the body's been burnt. You might not have the fingerprints left. You know, we didn't know how much of this body in general was burned.
And obviously, because it is outside, yes, animals and scavengers aren't going to have come along whilst it was still on fire, but you don't know how long the victim had been there after the fire before they'd been found by the RSPB workers. So there is potential that some of the some of the evidence could have been moved.
Yeah.
So the search area, they didn't really mention the search area in anything I saw.
No. I'm guessing it'd be quite large.
But it would have to be quite wide.
Yeah.
Just to cover
where the animals could have taken things.
Yeah.
So in this case, not a lot of the belongings, like we've said, could be found, but there was a really badly damaged phone that was found on the victim. And the detectives, I mean, when they said this, I thought, I don't think we do this here. They said we tried to turn it on straight away. Yeah. And I was like, digital forensics in the UK or where we are in sort of South Yorkshire, West Yorkshire would have been like, don't touch that and bring it to me. Don't you dare turn it on. So, I mean, they've got something, but at the moment, it's not looking like it can be a lot. But in this case, digital forensics did play a huge part. And as we talk you through this, it's just going to show how much digital forensics has developed over time, isn't it?
Definitely.
And we do talk about this all the time. In general, it's a really up and coming area. And when I did my degree, my undergraduate degree, there was no digital forensics module. But I know that now, within the forensic degree courses, you can do digital forensics just to get like a basic knowledge for the modules.
Yeah.
Which I wish I'd have done, because I would have found that so interesting.
Yeah, it would be fascinating, wouldn't it, to track back through everything. So the vehicle was completely burnt out, but, and again, I think it's so clever, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because they couldn't get like a license plate or anything. However, there was an engine number that was actually etched into the engine on the metalwork. So that remained, and they then managed to match the engine to the model of the car and discovered that it was a white BMW 1M.
That's quite a rare car as well. It's not like one that you see. Well, I've not really seen many of those. It's not something that you come across like a Corsa or something all the time.
Yeah.
And it's quite a nice car as well.
Well, that's what they said, didn't they? Because they said it seemed odd that such a nice car was found in such a kind of remote location.
Yeah.
And from the off, obviously, they're not jumping to any conclusions, but you are going to hypothesise as to what it might be related to.
Yeah.
And due to the severity of the injuries, obviously, the kind of disposing of evidence in terms of setting the car alight, and then this quite wealthy, rare car, they weren't sure whether it could be either gang or drug related at that point.
Yeah, which is, it's crazy, isn't it? Like that there's that much violence that has gone on. The police go straight to sort of gangs and organised crime.
And you can understand it, but that rather than just going down that track and looking at either gangs or drug dealers in the area, they didn't do that, which again is good.
Yeah.
And instead, they just tracked back this vehicle to any potential owners of that particular vehicle in the area.
Yeah.
Again, we mentioned in last week's episode how difficult it is to actually go through all of the registered owners of that type of vehicle. However, in this case, it would have been slightly easier.
Easier than the, what was it last week, a Hyundai, wasn't it?
Yeah. Because there aren't so many people driving around in one of those. And they did come up with a name at that point, and the name was Stephen Donaldson. And Stephen was a 27-year-old male, and he lived with his parents and worked offshore. So it was still unclear at this stage whether or not it was in fact the body of Stephen. There's kind of no categorical proof or evidence at that stage.
You sort of know it's his car, but you know, is it just his car and he wasn't in it? You know, there's so many, what's it called? Reasons why he might not be there, you know, and you'd be thinking as
someone stolen
you'd want to check all the records, wouldn't you, first to make sure.
So meanwhile, while this is going on, Bill Donaldson has actually been interviewed in different like documentaries and things, and he's the father of Stephen, and he said that a friend of Stephen's had actually been round to the house earlier that day just asking if they'd seen him anywhere because they couldn't get hold of him. Do
you think his friend had seen anything, that something had happened,
to say,
or
isn't it?
Do you think it was just like, because say if I couldn't get hold of you
wouldn't want to worry.
I wouldn't, Mom. And I wouldn't want to, I'd come round to your house maybe, but like to go to your parents' house when it's only been a few hours of you not replying. You know what I mean?
He lived there, didn't he? So I guess that'd be the first place you'd, like, if he's asleep or whatever.
But then Bill did say, didn't he, he's a 27-year-old man.
He can come and go
He comes and goes and does whatever he wants and, you know, goes out to work. And they said it wasn't strange that they'd not seen him for that amount of time. So until his friend came round, his parents didn't think anything of it, did they, really?
And you don't know whether the friend had come round but just didn't say anything because he didn't want to worry the family, or whether or not he was just looking for him.
Yeah, he just couldn't find him. Yeah,
it's unclear. But later that same day, Stephen's father, Bill, did then hear about a body that had been discovered, and they kind of didn't really know what to do with that information. At that stage, they'd then not heard from Stephen, and he says they were just in shock, really. But ultimately, they did then report their son missing.
Yeah.
And when they reported their son missing, obviously you give a description of that kind of family member or whoever it may be that has gone missing, and there's something called antecedent markers, and they gave an account that he'd got tattoos, and ultimately his leg tattoos were what was actually not the deciding factor in confirming that it was in fact the body of Stephen.
Yeah, they actually identified him, didn't they?
Yeah.
And I was thinking about this at the time, though, and even though sort of like we know each other really well, do you think if this was a case where something had happened to one of us, do you think we'd be able to identify each other from tattoos? Because I'm not sure I would with yours. And then I thought, no, because I don't know all of them. Like, I know you did like animals all over.
Yeah.
But like, I can't just see a picture of an animal and be like, yep, that's better.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
you'd probably have to. Well, you'd do your stalky. You'd look back at photos.
Yeah, I'd have to go through like your Instagram and stuff.
And track me.
Yeah, but then I thought, God, I should probably be telling more people my what are they called, antecedent markers? Yeah.
Markers. Yeah. Well, funnily enough, I was talking to my grandma about this case, and just. Some light conversation with your grandma. And I said, you see, my tattoos are a good thing. I said, you never know, one day they might be helping out.
I bet she's like, brilliant, me. Thanks for that. Scare her even more.
Here you go, grandma, think of me. But yeah, but it's just, again, horrific to think that it was his legs that were the identification, because that clearly means that to some extent the rest of his body had been either injured or burnt to such a degree that they couldn't make
that was the only thing. Yeah.
So ultimately, Bill and his wife have then been told that Stephen Donaldson, their 27-year-old son, has been found brutally murdered. And again, they weren't sure whether or not this was gang related, but as soon as they started talking to the family, interviewing friends, none of that really aligned.
It didn't, because he was such like one of his friends came on and did one of the interviews, and he was saying, it was always a carry on with him. He was known as Stevie D. He was always laughing. He was always the joker. He had a good job. He had a good family. It just didn't fit into any of the gangs or organised crime.
Yeah, and he got a really great set of mates. He was really popular, so none of it seemed to make sense.
And there weren't anyone either that disliked him. His friends said, like, if you spoke to people, like, everyone would say, like, how fun or how funny it was in general.
So they're now looking for a motive for murder, and they also looked at, obviously the post-mortem was conducted, and as well as all of the horrific injuries that we've already mentioned, it appeared that he'd actually got some of these injuries were defensive injuries from when it looks like he'd actually been sat in the car. So it's not even like he's been involved in an altercation that's gone too far.
Yeah.
He was sat in his car trying to defend himself.
I feel like that does show, though, that the attack was unprovoked.
Yeah.
Because if you thought someone was going to try and maybe fight you or something, you'd get yourself out of the car ready, whereas he didn't, and it was all, obviously he got some horrific injuries, but in the post-mortem the pathologist actually said that the cause of death was from repeated blows to the back of his head and neck with an axe or machete, and that caused his spinal cord to be cut.
Severed. Yeah, which is just a horrific way to go. I mean, no murder is a nice way, obviously, to die. But if you imagine the amount
of pain that you're going to be in,
yeah, just absolutely horrific. And the fact that he'd got these defensive injuries to suggest that he'd tried to get out of that situation.
Yeah. So you've got all those blows to the back of the head and the neck, and then you've also got numerous stabbing and slicing injuries on his body as well. It's just a horrific, probably prolonged attack.
They haven't got any suspects at this stage. They've got no clear motive for this attack. And obviously Stephen hadn't mentioned to anyone that he was in danger. So when talking in conversation to his friends, they'd obviously mention, well, I don't know whether they'd mentioned specifically that the mobile phone was burnt, but one of his friends did say that it was broken already, and that he'd recently been into the Apple store.
Yeah, I thought this was crazy.
Incredible
how it all
police work
how it all
case,
got
I think.
worked back.
Yeah.
So the Apple store was in Aberdeen, and at this point the police thought, oh great, because it's a big shopping centre, it's quite new, it's really busy, there's lots of CCTV. And when they looked on the CCTV, Stephen was seen going into the Apple store with his friend to get his phone fixed. Therefore, that meant that the Apple shop would have most likely downloaded his phone.
Yeah.
And the police could access that through Apple rather than through the phone that was broken.
Yeah.
But when the police went into the Apple store and spoke to the person who had served Stephen, he actually said, oh, he backed it up to another device. So the police now knew if they found this other device, they would find absolutely everything that was on this phone. And it was quite close to the murder, wasn't it? It was quite close to the time of the murder.
Yeah.
So you knew that in the lead up to all this, you were going to get everything from that one device.
Hopefully as recent as you could kind of get it. So they've now got potential backup for right the way up to a few days potentially before the murder. And at that point, a digital media investigator and her team, she was called DC Sarah Kennedy.
She was really good, wasn't she?
Yeah, so they did find that it was actually his laptop that they'd backed it up to. They then got access to the laptop, and they were able to track these communications right up to the day before his death.
Yeah, that's crazy, isn't it? That it had still...
Yeah, but again, the amount of... I mean, she had a whole team working on it. The amount of man-hours that it would take to trawl through that data.
We make it sound like it's easy and they just take it and plug it in and it all comes up. But it's not. There's like full teams of people working on this.
Yeah. So it did become clear that Stephen was in or had been in a romantic relationship with a woman that was named Tasmin.
Yeah.
She was ID'd as 19-year-old Tasmin Glass, and it seemed like they had quite a nice relationship.
Yeah, she was local, but I think a little bit younger, wasn't she? She was 19 years old.
Yeah, but she was well known. Yeah. So again, Stephen's friend referenced having known her. She was quite into like amateur dramatics and stuff. Yeah. So again, you do tend to know the people that were doing that kind of thing. She'd got a job in a local either cafe or sandwich shop.
Yeah.
So she'd have been quite well known, and they were known as a couple as getting on really well. I think Stephen had mentioned that she'd got a really nice smile.
Yeah.
And they'd kind of become friends, and then very quickly it then turned into a romantic relationship.
Yeah, and she'd said to be really likeable as well. Like everyone who spoke about her had said she was a likeable person. There was nothing, her and Stephen did have a really sort of nice relationship.
Yeah. Obviously, because she is now close to the victim, they went to speak to Tasmin, and they asked about her whereabouts for the 6th of June, and she said that she'd been out swimming with her friends. Her friends' names were Callum Davidson, Stephen Dickey, and Claire Ogston. So there was 4 of them. They'd gone swimming, then gone back to Callum's house, and Tasmin then says or states that she was actually going to go and meet Stephen to pick him up from a place called Peter Pan Park, and she got there, which was about a 5-minute drive from the nature reserve, interestingly.
Yeah.
And she basically said that she got there was no sign of Stephen, so she decided to just go home. Got home about 11 o'clock at night, saw her mum, spoke to her mum, went to bed.
Yeah.
The following morning, she then woke up and then texted Stephen. That was that.
Yeah. So she, at this moment in time, has got an alibi because the police know she went to the park to check on him. He wasn't there, but then her mum did say she was back in the house at this time. Yeah. So at the moment, she's sort of she's not suspicious, but the police still have to sort of explore every option and still have to look into proving her alibi, don't they?
Yeah, they've got to verify it. So obviously they've spoken to her mum, but then they wanted to check that she'd then not gone back out or anything like that.
And this was what digital forensics can do. I know we keep going on about this in this episode, but they were talking about your router at home, and when you are connecting to someone's Wi-Fi, like when you come into my old house, you would have just automatically connected to it.
Yeah.
But if police wanted to know your whereabouts, they would have known you were just connecting to it.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. So from your router, they can actually tell what time your phone connects and disconnects from it. So therefore, like when you're leaving the house, you'll get to a certain point on your driveway and it'll disconnect. And there is actually times and dates of that.
Yeah. Madness.
Yeah.
They also then had a look at her Apple Watch data, because she'd got an Apple Watch, and that showed, obviously you've got the health thing on there, so obviously like I have one. But you can do health data on there, and on the health data there's your heart rhythm and your heart rate.
Yeah.
And that showed that it was consistent and pretty steady, which suggested or aligned with the fact that she was probably asleep.
Yeah.
It was like a resting rhythm and heart rate.
So from her connecting to the router at home, not disconnecting again, and from the Apple Watch staying consistent, they could now say, by 11 o'clock, more than likely she was home and in bed. And the good thing with digital forensics, you can't really dispute it. There's no it's either yes or no, isn't it?
Yes, yeah.
Which I quite like.
They then spoke to the other three. So I am going to refer to the other three with their surnames just because there's another Stephen involved. So one of the other guys that Tasman was with was called Stephen. So Davidson, we're going to reference, Dickie, and then Claire Ogston. So they all were obviously questioned. They stated that yes, Tasman was right, that's what had happened, and that they'd drunk a few tinnies or cans or whatever, got a little bit drunk, but they'd gone to sleep around 12 o'clock at night. So it hadn't been like a heavy night drinking. Yeah. So investigators are kind of a bit of a standstill. You know, they have found information on the phone. That's then led to Tasman, but then she's got an alibi and the other three
have basically backed that up.
Yeah. So motive was still unclear. By day 3, they'd actually taken 23 other people's phones.
So when they seized this and this came up, I thought, whose phones did they seize? Yeah. Because, like, I don't know about you, but I ain't got 23 friends to seize the phones. Well, you have Miss Popular. But, like, you'd think the people that was with Tasman that night, so you've got the 4 people there.
Yeah.
Maybe
probably
some
the
of Stephen's friends.
Yeah, probably, like, the one that went with him into the shopping centre. Yeah. Maybe his parents.
And then you've got Stephen's phone and his parents. But that's still only 9. Like...
Yeah.
23 is a lot, and can you imagine all those 23 phones coming in and the digital forensics thinking,
they're like, right, wow, longer haul.
Yeah, we've got a lot to do now.
But again, the reason that they did that was to gain a better understanding and a better idea of Stephen and the people around him. So Dickie's phone data didn't actually marry up with the handset itself. So obviously you've got all of the data that's either in the cloud or that's been accessed by the phone provider, but then when they were actually physically looking at the handset, they could see that either some maybe photos or messages had been deleted because there was more evidence from the data than there were on the handset.
And a lot of people don't realise that if you just delete something from your phone, it doesn't delete. Yeah. It can be retrieved. And we say this all the time in schools, don't we? People think they can say something on a text message and delete it, and it doesn't actually disappear. And it's even the same with Snapchat as well.
Yeah. I thought, and really, I don't delete anything. I never delete messages unless my phone is full storage-wise, which does happen quite a lot.
Which it is all the time.
Yeah. So it's not necessarily suspicious that he's deleted some things, like it is possible, but they also had a look, and again, this is something I wasn't aware of.
See, I was aware of this.
Oh, of course you were.
Because I have had to check this a few times in the past on certain people.
So there's something, well, here's one for the ones that don't know, like me. Apparently on iPhones there's also something called significant locations, and it must be the default is that it's turned on, and then you have to physically turn it off. Yeah, you're always trying to capture your data. So, which again I had no idea.
I bet you went straight on and turned it off, didn't you?
I haven't even looked. Maybe I should. So significant locations basically tracks your locations, and if you appear in certain places, it will basically pinpoint it as a place that you've been.
For mine, I checked mine. I've not checked it recently, to be fair. But is what you could see on mine is it had determined what was my home.
Yeah.
Because that must have been the place that I was sleeping overnight.
Yeah.
And then it determined my work location, and it had determined, I can't remember where it might be, my friend's house or something, or somewhere where I would spend a significant amount of time. And it would say on there, I've not checked recently, but it'd say what time you then were at that location.
Like frequently.
Yeah.
God, mine's probably very confused because I'm here, there and everywhere.
Yeah.
I've not spent a night in my own bed for the past week and a half. No,
check you out.
It's not as interesting as it sounds.
No, Shell's been on holiday.
Yeah. Just from one bed to another. But, yeah, so I wonder whether it'd be able to pin down my home.
We'll have to have a look at it after, won't we? Yeah, we'll compare.
We'll let you know. I'll put it on the story. So they found his significant locations. Obviously, there's a list of them. And in previous weeks, they were then able to get a kind of better idea of tracking movements. So Dickie and Davidson had both stated that they were asleep from about 12ish. However, their phones showed that between 12:30 and 1:30 a.m, they were actually near the local Kirimar Health Centre. And so they're saying, suspicious.
Well, they're obviously not asleep there, are they?
Yeah, so they're not asleep. And not only are they not asleep, but they're at another location.
Yeah.
They were actually... interestingly, because I picked up on this, but I wasn't sure. They were I think Claire and Davidson, is that right? Lived together.
Yeah.
So it was their home. Obviously, I'm assuming they looked into Claire, but it was only Dickie and Davidson that were out and about at between 12:30 and 1:30.
So when you've got that data as well that they're out and about, you can sort of match it up to other things as well. So now they could look at CCTV in the area to confirm that. And they did, didn't they? They found it. Well, I mean, the CCTV to me looked quite grainy, but we always say this, don't we? Yeah. We know they obviously do a lot to it and enhance it.
To be fair, they did zoom in on his face at one point, and that was pretty clear.
Yeah, it was more clear. So they could actually see that that they'd both been there and they were on CCTV. So
it was at 12:49. So they've said they're asleep from 12, and at 12:49
they're clearly on CCTV.
CCTV, which suggests that they've given false alibis.
So then, because that comes up suspicious anyway, the police will now be thinking, well, who are these two people? If they're not known to us already, let's look into the background. And when the police looked into it, they did find out they were quite violent individuals.
Yeah.
So that's not going to help the case, was it?
No, they've got quite a violent history. They were known to other people as being violent. Interestingly, they weren't known to Stephen. So it didn't appear that there was any connection between Dickie and Davidson and Stephen.
I feel like they'd have run in totally different circles.
Yeah.
Because obviously with Stephen having a good job, a good social life, and, it seems like a totally different life to these people who were criminals.
Equally, on this CCTV, it's important to say that although it was grainy, as we've mentioned, it's pretty remote, the area. So it's not like a built-up area where you might still have people out and about at 1 o'clock in the morning. It's dead.
The streets are dead, weren't they?
And then there's two people. So, it's pretty bang on that it's them. Ultimately, they wanted to know what the connection was, if any, because they couldn't find one. And
because there's not a connection between Stephen and these two guys, they do know there is a connection between Tasmin and the two guys. So now the police are going to look probably at the connection, because that is the only link they've got at the moment. So they do actually go back and re-interview Tasmin.
We say re-interview, but they actually just
talk to her.
Yeah. So it was a female detective, and she went to Tasmin's place of work. And again, if you've ever, they always do this in Vera. whenever Vera goes and has a chat with someone, they're always working. Quite often it's like at a seaside frontage cafe or like in a fish and chip shop or something.
Do they stop working?
I got a vision of it, and generally speaking, they'll be like, all right, I can clock off for 5 minutes, and they'll go and sit down. Yeah. Now, bear in mind, Stephen was Tasmin's boyfriend. He's been brutally murdered. She would have an awareness of that. And now you've got a detective turning up at your workplace wanting to talk to you.
If no one had been caught as well, I wouldn't have wanted to go to work and go out of the house, because you'd be thinking, someone is still out there who murdered my boyfriend. Like, you'd be trying everything you can. I'd be hounding down the police and the detectives saying, find out who killed my boyfriend.
Yeah, I wouldn't like to be on the wrong side of you in
in one of those situations. I'd be like, have you done this?
Like, I've done this, this and this. Yeah. What have you done?
What have you done for the case?
Yeah. But this detective just said that Tasmin came across really strangely. She didn't stop what she was doing at all. And she didn't appear to care, really. She wasn't upset. They were obviously discussing his brutal murder, but she didn't seem to be affected by it. She actually stated that she'd split up with Stephen back in April, which isn't an awful long time.
You'd still be upset.
Yeah, you'd still be absolutely heartbroken that someone you loved
or someone that you
murdered.
Even know was murdered. Never mind it being like an ex-boyfriend.
But again, she then says that apparently Tasmin was just still making sandwich filler. She was quite blasé about the whole situation, which is really...
strange,
yeah. She then says, oh, and I've got something to tell you, to this detective, and then states that she is now in a sexual relationship with Dickie. So we now have potentially that she split up with Stephen. She's now in a new relationship. Whether or not it was serious, we don't know. But with
it gives a motive now, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's now with one of the people that we know has a false alibi and was seen around the area at the time. Stephen, from what they could gather looking at all of his phone data, still believed that they were in a relationship to some extent. There was still communication between the pair of them. But Tasmin was clearly leading a bit of a double life because, like we've said, it doesn't appear that they ran in similar circles. So she'd kind of gone from this... You've got, like, her doing amateur dramatics and things on one side and being well-known and well-liked and with this lovely guy called Stephen. And then on the other hand, she's living
dating a criminal.
Yeah, a criminal who...
A violent criminal.
Drunk and, So, all a bit... odd. Ultimately, I've said that again. I am working on it, listeners. If it's annoying you, I'm trying. So then, Davidson's girlfriend, we mentioned Claire Ogden, she then came into the police station and said that she wanted to provide a statement or an account of what had actually happened that night. In this account, she said that on the night of the murder, Tasmin was upset because Stephen was ringing her pretty incessantly and that she was getting multiple calls. She then had obviously mentioned it to all three people, so Claire and then Dickie and Davidson. And at that point, Dickie and Davidson then left the house and they didn't then return back until the early hours of the morning.
It's crazy that they said they were asleep, but what is even worse is that they actually told Claire that they had attacked Stephen.
Yes.
So now we know there is a link between them, and now we know as well from what they said that Tasmin was present at the start of the attack as well.
Which can be... again, like backed up by the fact that we do know that she did leave the home and that she had driven supposedly to Peter Pan Park and then returned home. So we do know that she did leave.
I just don't understand how her heart rate didn't go up and down. Because if you've come home and you know, even if you don't know that your ex has been killed, even if you have sort of orchestrated or been there or had anything to do with someone getting beat up quite brutally, my heart rate would be through the roof.
Yeah, there's no way I'd be asleep.
And she went to bed and she actually went to sleep.
Yeah, she could actually sleep, which is just absolutely baffling. We don't know what time that Stephen had actually got to the location.
Yeah.
So we don't really know timeline to that extent. But, I mean, either way, to be back home, get into bed, and then just fall straight to sleep is absolute madness.
While your ex-boyfriend or boyfriend, whatever they were, is being murdered.
Yeah. It's horrific. And really calculated. So, on Friday the 15th of June, things did happen pretty quickly, really. Yeah. On Friday the 15th of June, all three are then arrested on suspicion of murder. But, unfortunately, during interview, again, it's not like on the telly where they're giving all of the information. All three are basically responding with no comment.
So I expected Davidson and Dickey to act how they did in the police interview.
Yeah.
But I was quite surprised from watching the police interview at how Tasmin was acting.
Yeah.
And I know we've said before about the sandwich shop and she didn't react, but she was just like staring at the detective and there was no emotion. It wasn't like, there wasn't even I've got caught for this, I need to act remorseful. There was nothing fake and nothing real, if you get what I mean.
It was, really odd. And bear in mind, she's only 19. It's very daunting. Like, if she's never been in trouble with the police or anything before,
do you think...
One, you've lost someone that you're close to.
Yeah.
Then you're having to be sat in a police station. Now she's been arrested for murder. She's probably not got an awareness of what it was. We don't know whether or not she knew that Claire had gone in and made the statement. But either way, she does just seem very disconnected from the severity of the case and from losing a loved one,
I was quite baffled by the whole situation. So when these have all obviously gone no comment in the interview, the police then look into the locations of the suspects, again using the health app data.
Yeah.
So the health app data can show how far someone's travelled, how many steps they've taken, how many stairs or how many floors they've climbed. And I don't know if your health app data is automatically on, because I know that it would only record... If you're looking at health app data, it would only record the times where you physically got your phone on you. Whereas if you look at your Apple Watch data or your Fitbit or whatever, then you don't need to have your phone on you and it syncs, obviously, to the phone.
Yeah.
So with your health app data, sometimes I don't find mine's accurate.
Track my steps.
No, mine's not very accurate, but my watch is accurate.
Yeah.
So it syncs it.
Yeah.
So you do wonder how accurate this is to the amount of like steps or whatever.
Yes, but oh God.
You said it again.
But the fact that there is some data on there, again, verifies the fact that he's not asleep. It's not this like resting heart rhythm.
They're not at home in bed.
There is data. So it said that he'd climbed 11 flights of stairs, travelled 416 metres and done 585 steps.
Which is crazy. So this is now, along with the other information and the CCTV, has now fully just discredited his whole alibi and can be used as evidence.
Yeah. Location-wise as well, it also then linked to Peter Pan Park, where Tasmin had said that she'd been.
It was basically...
That was only like 5 minutes from where Stephen's body was found.
Yeah, because it was on the map and I saw like them sort of recreate it, and they put on the map where the body was found and then put on the map the house where they'd come from.
Yeah.
And the distance was near enough the exact amount of metres and steps that they'd taken.
But again, what I think was incredible police work is they didn't just say, right, okay, there's the data, let's use it as evidence. They then went one step further and actually had officers trying to kind of exert the same amount of energy or travel the same distance so that they could get actual verification of either distance travelled or amount of energy exerted and things like that. So they didn't just go off the data, they then backed up the data.
Tried to do it, yeah. So now they sort of know the route that was taken from the house to Peter Pan Park, and they look for more CCTV along the route, and they had 10 officers working on just the CCTV, so literally trawling through hours of footage. And it was really strange because at 2 a.m, this is a little bit more clear, but you can see Davidson cycle him.
Yes. So they then knew that he was on a bike or had been on a bike at some stage, and they managed to recover the bike, obviously test it for forensics, and it came back with a positive blood DNA result, which was then a match to Stephen. So now, again, they've not got a match to like the location where the crime took place, but they've now got I can't speak all this. They've now got a direct link between Stephen and Davidson.
And there's not really any other reason that blood could have got on the handlebars of Davidson's bike without him being there or being present or being involved in the attack on Stephen.
Yeah.
So this is probably the main piece of actual, I want to say forensic evidence, but not like, obviously digital forensics is a big part.
Yeah.
But if you've got DNA to link someone, it's like,
case.
They do absolutely love it.
So the investigation's going pretty well at this point, but from their point of view, they're still thinking, but hang on a minute, what is actually the motive here?
Yeah.
Like, yes, if you've got an supposedly ex-boyfriend ringing Tasmin and she's upset by it, that would be annoying. But for Dickie and Davidson to then just get up and decide to attack the ex doesn't make sense. We know that there were no threats from Stephen that was like, threatening Tasmin or something. So it wasn't like they were trying to defend her.
There wasn't a build-up to it either, was there?
There still didn't seem to be a clear motive. So again, they are looking at further data, and Tasmin again just didn't seem to grasp how serious the case was. They were even kind of telling her that they'd got data from the mobile phones and things like that, and she just didn't seem fazed by it at all.
She didn't even react, did she?
No, but she had, again, like Dickie and Davidson, deleted some of her data, so they could see that it wasn't matching up, and there were just specific messages within conversations that had been deleted.
They were deleted from the handset, but not obviously deleted from the phone record data.
Again, deleting them in the first place is more of a red flag than if you'd have just kept them. They'd find them either way, and ultimately they did recover deleted messages, which actually showed that Tasmin had bought a car by Stephen. Stephen had bought the car, but then she had actually written it off in an accident, and she then owed Stephen for the money from the insurance. So she actually owed him £1,000. Now, again, if they have then split up at that stage, Stephen quite rightly was asking for his £1,000 back.
Yeah.
It's not a small amount of money by any means.
And we think that's what the calls were made about on the night.
Yeah.
They were actually going to meet up on the pretense that Tasmin was going to bring him the rest of the money that he owed. And one sad thing though, when the police went through the messages, they said that Stephen was asking constantly to meet up at her house.
Yeah.
So he just wanted to meet up at her house, and she...
Because why wouldn't you? Do you know what I mean? Why would you
meet in a park?
Random park where you've got to drive?
I'll just call at your house and pick the money up and then it's done.
Yeah.
But she actually insisted on meeting at Peter Pan Park, which we obviously later find out why.
Yeah. It also appeared, because obviously they would have looked at financial records as well, and it did appear that Tasmin wasn't in a financial position to be able to pay that money back.
Yeah.
So she was probably, stressed and worrying whether or not she'd actually told Davidson and Dickie that he was either threatening her for money or that she couldn't pay it back or what. We don't actually know, but what we do know is that Tasmin orchestrated this meet. She is the one that lured Stephen then to Peter Pan Park on the pretense of him getting his money back.
And you just think he thinks he's going there to meet his girlfriend, his ex-girlfriend, whatever they were, and she was ultimately leading him to his death.
It's just,
for £1,000.
For £1,000.
And I mean, £1,000, it is a lot of money, don't get me wrong, but to take someone's life for £1,000 to me is actually it's insane.
Yeah. And just so devious, because again, it doesn't really matter what she told Davidson and Dickie, whether or not she said that Stephen was horrible and whatever, or whether or not she just said that she wanted him out of the way. The minute that she lured Stephen to his death, again, if she saw the beginning of that attack take place, at any point
she could have stopped it.
Panicked, she could have stopped it, she could have rung someone for help, but she didn't. She went home and she fell asleep.
Yeah, which is crazy. So we actually find out what really happened in this situation. And Claire had already said that the three of them left the house together.
Yeah.
So they actually left the house and they drove up to Peter Pan Park. But instead of driving all the way up, all three of them are in the car, and Tasmin actually stopped halfway up the hill and let the other two out of the car. She then drove to the top of the hill just to check that Stephen was there.
So again, at that point, you'd think like, oh, shit, is this a bad idea?
He is actually there. He's going to get her. I can stop this.
Yeah.
And she still didn't. No. So by now we've got Davidson and Dickie who are both on foot. Mm-hmm. So they sort of follow up the hill and they start attacking Stephen. And as soon as the attack started, Tasmin then got in the car and drove home.
But again, what I keep forgetting is that they were armed with, and I don't actually know whether it was an axe or a machete. That wasn't clear, was it?
It's really, I was thinking though, an axe or a machete to me is big. How do you conceal it on a bike? Or did they have it in the car?
No, I think they'd probably disposed of it by that point.
Do you think they put it in the car to take it up there then? But then how did
it wasn't really mentioned, was it?
How did Davidson be riding around on his bike at 2 a.m? Do you think they went home after and then picked up the bike and then he decided to go out?
It didn't look like he'd been in, like his clothing and stuff wasn't. So I think potentially that was after they'd kind of covered up on his way back to the home.
Yeah.
But, yeah, again, even if Tasmin had said, scare him, beat him up a bit, even if she'd said that, seeing them then armed with such a
machete,
heavy weapon, and that also goes to show the kind of people that they are. If they've got either an axe or a machete, like why have you got those things? And again, if someone says, will you go and scare this person? And the first thing you think of is, oh yeah, I'll take an axe. It's just horrific. Like they were clearly knew that they were going to inflict. You can't do one subtle injury, can you? You can't, they clearly went there to inflict.
It's going to be serious.
Brutal attack, and serious injuries, if not murder.
And the police believe there were actually 2 locations involved, so he was maybe moved and taken somewhere, but they didn't know. I saw one bit that said about maybe taken in the boot of a car, but who had the car? Because Tasmin had gone home.
Yeah, it is a bit unclear from that perspective. But it's believed then that after they'd killed him, they actually dragged Stephen's body out of the car and then placed him almost under the car and then set the car alight. But he wasn't fully under the car because obviously his body was found
at the side to the side of the car.
So
I think it was just so they could destroy more evidence in one. So that once you set the car on fire, they expected to set the car on fire, it hit the petrol tank, maybe there'd be a bit of a blow up or explosion. Then it damaged the body and destroy more evidence.
But it would make more sense to
leave him in the car.
Odd.
No, I have no idea why that happened.
Thankfully, obviously, they were arrested and charged. The case then went to trial. I don't actually know when the trial was held. Do you?
No, I couldn't find much out about it. I mean, normally it takes quite a while to put the evidence together, doesn't it?
But bear in mind that the case took place in Aberdeen, or close to Aberdeen. This actually went to Edinburgh Crown Court.
Yeah.
So it was Edinburgh Crown Court, and the Judge Lord Pentland, that was actually presiding over the case, said that both Dickie and Davidson had acted with unrestrained ferocity. Stephen had tried to defend himself and you cut him down without mercy. Again, then mentioned that they had dragged Stephen's body out of the car, pushed him under and then set it all alight.
Yeah.
What I thought was really telling of the kind of people that they were is that, again, like we've seen in other cases, they then started trying to blame each other.
Yeah.
So Dickie and Davidson both blamed each other for the attack. One of them said, oh, well, he was already armed with a knife, so he clearly went out there to do...
The other one was saying, oh, well, he hit him 12 times or something. Well, how do you know? How do you know it was 12 times? Because we stood there counting like 1, 2. You just wouldn't in that situation. So we know that it was, we'll probably never know the exact truth of what went on that night in terms of the attack and who did what. But we do know that both of these people were responsible, and Tasmin as well. So all 3 of them. And I feel like in the trial for the police, this was quite a hard one. Because they don't know if they're going to get 3 convictions, 2 convictions, 1 conviction, or none. Like, if they get 2 convictions and Tasmin gets off, it's like a good result that they've got the 2, but then 1 person is still... Do you know what I mean?
I know. It's always
one.
difficult as well, because I think in the cases where you have got someone that has orchestrated a murder, but ultimately didn't actually... murder the victim. I always struggle with the fact that they don't get as harsh a sentence.
Is it called conspiracy?
So
or
it's
accessory?
Either culpable homicide sometimes.
That's very American,
sometimes,
isn't it?
Sometimes it's accessory to murder. Sometimes it's conspiracy to murder. It can vary, but it's never as...
Never as extreme, is it?
As extreme in terms of sentence. And I can understand that, because obviously they're going to have more evidence against the people that have committed the crime to link them. But at the same time, with a lot of these things, I think, well, it wouldn't have happened without that person. Even if they've not actually physically murdered them, the person wouldn't be murdered in the first place if it wasn't for them. So surely they're more culpable than the people. Do you know what I mean?
It's just 100%.
Difficult.
So in this case, all 3 of them were found guilty. So we've got Tasmin Glass was convicted of culpable homicide, and she received a 10-year sentence. And
Which
then we've got...
I mean, I don't think it's enough.
No,
but it's a good
but
sentence.
It is a decent amount.
Yeah.
And then we've got Stephen Dickey and Callum Davidson were convicted of murder, and they were both sentenced to 23 and 24 years.
Which is still, again, I think isn't...
For the brutality...
considering the
brutality of it, I would have thought they'd have got like... Because 24 years, they've not said with possibility of parole in however many. So does that mean if they have admitted it and they show remorse, they can go up for parole after halfway through?
You'd like to think
like
not.
You, with how brutal it was, you'd like to think that the 23 and 24 years would mean 23 and 24.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So it's just a horrific case, and as always, it is Stephen Donaldson's life that we are remembering. It's his life that was so tragically lost. He probably thought he was gonna, get over the girl and
live his life
back, and then live his life, and it was just tragically cut so very short. 27. I mean, I'm now older than him.
Yeah,
and you just think there's so much more life that I have planned. It doesn't bear to think about, does it? That's another one done. So let us know what you are enjoying at the minute. Again, if you've got any recommendations, let us know what you thought to the Eyes and Ears episode that we covered recently, because I had fun doing that.
I've got some good short clips from that as well. Cool. So I don't normally do the short clips from the Eyes and Ears, because obviously it's just talking about like TV and whatever, but I did actually pick out a few good ones. So I think you'll like those.
Nice. And other than that, make sure you leave us a review, please.
Follow us on socials.
And we will see you next time. Take care.
Bye.